Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, where in today's video we're going to be continuing My Hero Academia, The Dark Knight Returns, What If Deku Was Batman, Part 4. But as always, if you are new to the channel or if you're a regular and you enjoy what we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. Where we last left off with our series, Izuku along with Melissa were partnered together for the battle trial. Competing against both Kirishima and Tenya Ida, the two of them were able to work together successfully on the side of the heroes in the exam and pass. While Izuku has shown his immense skill, he still has a lot to learn before he can fully embrace the cowl of the bat. But now as we enter into today's story, how will Izuku fare when he has his first taste of real villain action? Will he be able to overcome the threats before him? And how will the other students fare as they come face to face with their encounter of villains? For all this and more, stay tuned as we now continue My Hero Academia, The Dark Knight Returns, What If Deku Was Batman, Part 4. As always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Izuku could still feel his head ringing some as the bus made its way from the main campus to the USJ, where the students were going to be getting their first experience in hero rescue. Of course, many were still in awe about the various performances from the battle trial. Most of them being spoken was about Izuku himself. The coolness of his new costume and the fact that he was taking up the mantle of the Batman. Some thought it was pretty ambitious to say the least, but others were impressed to see that Izuku was able to carry himself the way that he was. Of course, Kirishima and Ida could attest to this as well. But there was also Melissa. It wasn't lost on anyone that her costume was definitely inspired by All Might, to say the least, and her power-like quirk was kind of similar to his as well. Of course, Melissa tried not to draw any too much attention to herself, as she didn't want her secret to somehow get out. And then of course at the same time, there were many who wondered about Izuku. How was he so skilled? Izuku, as the best cover story, would explain that in order for him to be able to receive the tools that he had been given, there was training that was required. He wouldn't go into too much detail, but he promised that he had been trained to the best of his abilities, and as such, he was going to try his best in terms of hero work, even if he didn't have a quirk to speak of. Of course, Mr. Aizawa would be pretty tired by all of this, but even still, he recognized that his students had massive potential. As they had finally arrived to the USJ, they would meet with the rescue hero herself, 13. Everything was going fine, and there wasn't really much to speak of. Izuku's hero suit didn't take too much damage in his fight against Kirishima. It just required a few minor repairs, but it was ready to go. As they all waited at the entrance as the speech was being given, Izuku would notice off in the distance a black portal beginning to open. Instantly, the doors would shut behind the students, locking automatically, as dozens and dozens of villains started to make their way forward. Mr. Aizawa would curse under his breath. The school was somehow under attack, and it had to be at the worst time. Walking amongst the villains, there lay a boy with multiple hands covering his body, along with another man dressed in a suit, although his head and his hands, they weren't human at all. He looked like he was one dark cloud. The boy with multiple hands, even the ones covering his face, would scratch his neck irritably as he looked out. "Where is he?" Sources said that All Might was supposed to be here. It appears he has been delayed, my master. Well, Kirigiri, if All Might's going to keep us waiting, then why don't we give him some incentive to show up? We'll start by taking out the children. Kirigiri, following the orders of his master, would start to warp the villains to various locations. Mr. Aizawa would move to confront them, as he ordered for 13 to protect the students and to try to get them out as quickly as they could, and for someone to get into contact with All Might. Even though they tried to, it seemed as though all reception within the USJ was being blocked. Everyone's except for Izuku's. Thankfully, the monitor in his helmet, as well as the communication device, was working relatively well. Sure, while the villains were able to jam up the tech for the average individual, Wayne Tech was just a little bit different. Bruce would actually be sitting in a restaurant, enjoying his nice brunch, when suddenly he would get a call. Hello? Mr. Wayne, it's me. It's an emergency. The school, it's under attack. Calm down. What do you mean under attack? We're at the USJ. A group of villains have arrived and locked us in. Mr. Aizawa is going to engage them now, but our main focus is trying to get everyone here out as quickly as we can. Bruce would nod in understanding. As he stood, he made his way to his car, where Carrie would be waiting for him. The two of them making their way inside and rushing over to the USJ. While Carrie had the car driving on autopilot, she quickly donned into her hero costume, that of the Sparrow. In the meanwhile, Bruce would have a computer in the back seat. He would be feeding Izuku different information to allow him to assist in the fight. Listen, Izuku. I'm going to coach you on what to do. Pay very close attention and listen to what I say. Understood? Before Izuku could have a chance, though, to engage with the villains, Kurogiri would arrive and warp the students to various locations, even though Bakugo and Kirishima attempted to stop him. Now that they had all been flung to different spots, Izuku would find himself in a water-like area on a boat, alongside Sue, aka Froppy, and Melissa. As the three of them were together, Bruce could see what Izuku saw as he spoke into his ear. You've been sent to the Water District. In all likelihood, they're sending water-like villains after you. I understand. So what should I do? When facing against a water villain, even if they have the advantage in water, they still have weakness. Do you remember what they are? Izuku thought for a moment, and then he remembered. Yes, sound can travel greatly in water and disrupt their hearing, along with electrical currents. Precisely. Use your stun hand. If you can touch the water and get close enough, you'll be able to give them a little shock. But first, use the EMP batarangs. Throw them into the water and try to keep them disoriented before you make your strike. Izuku nodded as he prepared to jump. Both Melissa and Froppy would be a bit worried about Izuku. They didn't want him to do something that could potentially get him hurt or killed. But Izuku looked back to them and he promised that everything would be fine. He told Melissa to grab Froppy, and on his mark, they were to make a jump towards the mainland, while he would pull the villains his way. Once the plan was given, Izuku would make his jump. Immediately, the villains would see someone coming into the water. The moment Izuku landed, the water-based villains would swarm towards him. Izuku would throw out 4 batarangs, each one in a different direction. They were pretty slow even in the water, but this wasn't meant to hit their targets. Once they got close enough, Izuku would activate the EMP batarangs, causing a massive impulse of sound to go echoing out. Thankfully, they didn't affect Izuku, but for the water-based villains, their eardrums were throbbing, causing them to slow down as they tried to cover their ears to stop from the attack. At the same time, Izuku would use his electric stunning hand gloves, increasing them to max and launching them at a range, causing a great electrical current to flow through the water, stunning the villains and keeping them in place. They had been immobilized, and Izuku would go rocketing out of the water, his bat wings on either side of him as he glided towards Melissa and the others. Thankfully, for the most part, everyone was able to hold their own against the villains just fine, fighting them off in their own areas. They weren't particularly all that threatening, so there wasn't too much to worry about. At the same time, Ida had managed to escape, although a distress signal had already been sent by Izuku, allowing for the teachers to know where the others were. Ida was still going to go to the main campus and try to get help as fast as he could. All the while, Mr. Aizawa would find himself in the main area of the USJ, fighting against various villains, and even coming into contact with the multi-hand villain himself, who introduced himself as the ringleader of the group, Tomura Shigaraki. His quirk, a degenerative ability, when all 5 fingertips touched an object, it would cause it to rot and to decay at once. Mr. Aizawa feeling the brunt of this pain, as he had felt his elbow beginning to decay from just one touch. Izuku and the others watched on as they saw the villains being defeated. For the most part, Mr. Aizawa was able to hold his own just fine, but of course Izuku, he expected this. He and Mr. Aizawa weren't all that different. Sure, he had a quirk, but it wasn't like it was a quirk that gave him massive power. He could just erase the power of others. Because of this, it gave him an edge. He could even the playing field, and with his superior skills and knowledge, he was able to come out on top. But even still, things didn't stay all that great for long, as a monstrous beast would come out of nowhere, attacking Mr. Aizawa and knocking him out. Although he tried his best to fight against the beast, even erasing his quirk, he would be shocked to learn that this monster was so strong that its quirk didn't do much at all. Shigaraki referred to it as the Nomu, the ultimate killing machine that was made specifically to destroy the symbol of peace. Izuku, Melissa, and Froppy watched on as their teacher was getting battered and beaten. Izuku knew that he couldn't wait any further. However, Bruce would warn him before continuing, telling him that if this thing was made to fight All Might in his prime, then this was not something that they should be taking lightly. However, Izuku knew that he couldn't just sit by. He knew that he had to do something. He would have to remember his training, and he would have to try his best to hold this beast off. He told Bruce if he could hold out just until All Might arrived, then that was all he needed. He told Melissa and Froppy to get Mr. Aizawa out of there the moment he made an opening. The two of them would look at each other and nod, as Izuku, taking a deep breath, would activate his rocket boots and go charging straight towards the Nomu. It raised both its fists, ready to crush Mr. Aizawa's head. But before it could, Izuku would go flying and tackling it from the back, slamming it to the ground before jumping up once more. And just who the hell are you? I'm Batman. Izuku had said the words. Honestly, he wasn't sure that it would just roll off the tongue so easily for him. But even still, Shigaraki wasn't all that impressed. You're Batman? Please, you're just a kid playing pretend. That's what all of you are. You're worthless imitations. The real Batman, I imagined, would be far more superior. But it doesn't matter. In the end, I'm going to wipe all of you heroes off the face of this earth, starting with your precious symbol of peace. But when he arrives, I'll leave him a welcoming gift, that being your battered and broken bodies. Now, Nomu, destroy this would-be hero. The Nomu would run on all fours, charging towards Izuku. Izuku would flip over the Nomu before it could strike. However, it quickly changed directions and punched him, sending him flying across the ground. Thankfully, his power suit was able to keep him from taking too much damage, but he could feel from that strike alone, this thing was not something that could be taken lightly. Hand-to-hand combat with this thing was out of the question. He couldn't do to it what he did to Kirishima. He'd be killed. But still, he had to figure out a way to come out on top, a way to get the victory. That was when Bruce would command him once more, guiding him through the fight. As the Nomu went charging towards Izuku again, Izuku would throw 3 stun grenades, causing them to blind the Nomu in the thick smoke. Izuku quickly threw another batarang as it went flying out, the Nomu hearing the sound of the swooshing, going and charging directly towards it, only for Izuku to jump up and jump onto his back. As he took a piece of rope coil, he wrapped it around the Nomu's neck, almost riding him like a bull of sorts, just keeping him distracted and keeping him disoriented. Izuku would use his stun glove as he grabbed him by the head and delivered a high dose of voltage, doing whatever he could to try to keep the beast down. However, the Nomu would grab him off of his back and slam him down to the ground itself, before preparing to stomp him into the dirt. However, Izuku would evade at the last moment, before delivering a bicycle kick, knocking the Nomu's head square up and exposing his body. Izuku tried to deliver a few body blows, but those were to no avail. But still, it was worth a shot. The Nomu would bring down its fist once more, but Izuku would get out of the way. Shigaraki was starting to become a bit annoyed by all of this. Who did this brat think he was to try to fight against his precious Nomu? All the same, the other students watched on as they saw what was happening, how Izuku was fighting off against this beast on his own even without a quirk. They were really worried for him. Even if he had the gadgets and the gizmos, without a quirk, there was only but so much that he could do. However, Izuku would get some backup from an unexpected source. Just as the Nomu was about to strike at him, there would be the yell of howitzer impact, as from out of nowhere a large explosion would crash into the Nomu. Half of its body would be frozen over with ice, as Kirishima went barreling towards the beast, managing to break off its whole arm, as it yelled and writhed in pain. Izuku getting back up, he would see the others that were behind him, that being Kirishima, Todoroki, and Bakugo. There would also be another loud cry, as there would be the yell of smash. Melissa would come flying in as well, breaking off the Nomu's leg, causing it to fall over to the ground, half frozen and half in pain. Melissa smiled and said that she couldn't just leave her friend behind. She wanted to help out too. The 5 young heroes standing together, they looked back as the Nomu continued to drive and move. Shigaraki was not too pleased at all, especially at the idea of his Nomu potentially being defeated. Izuku told the others his plan, to try to stun and keep that thing down till All Might got here. However, Shigaraki just laughed. Wow, you really are an idiot. Just watch. Instantly, the Nomu, both its arm and leg would regrow as it yelled back out towards them. That thing was built to fight Prime All Might. I don't care if 100 of you ants try. In the end, a bunch of level 1s can never beat the boss. That was when, from out of nowhere, the doors to the USJ would fly open, as All Might would come flying in, landing between both the kids and the Nomu, as he delivered a devastating punch to its jaw, slamming it down to the ground below. All Might looked back to the students, thanking them for their swiftness and their act of bravery. But he gave them the thumbs up and told them to stand back, to leave this to him, and that he would take care of things from here. All Might would power up, and he and the Nomu would battle, the children getting a chance to see the #1 hero in action. Even fighting through his own pain, All Might was able to overcome, and ultimately, he was able to deliver the final blow to the Nomu, delivering a smash that went beyond 100%, and eventually defeating the monstrous beast. As if matters hadn't gotten any worse, the other heroes would arrive soon after. Shigaraki was not pleased. How had his plans been turned upside down? They must have cheated. That's what they did. He didn't lose. He was cheated. And it was all his fault. As he looked up towards All Might, as steam began to bellow around him, Melissa would be extremely worried. She was worried for All Might, for his secret to be revealed. Instantly, Shigaraki would go in to make a move, hoping to grab at All Might and just crush him right then and there. But before he could, 4 batarangs would be thrown, 2 stabbing him in the shoulder blades and the other 2 stabbing him in the leg, as Melissa would appear right in front of him, as she used Overflow 10% Palm Strike. She would attempt to strike Shigaraki in the chest, however a portal would open, as the pressure of the Palm Strike would be sent off to another area of the USJ. Kurogiri would grab Shigaraki and pull him through. Shigaraki's last images being of Melissa in his right eye and Izuku in his left. Those two, he would never forget them. At the same time, other heroes would arrive not too long after, helping to round up the would-be villains, as the students were all taken into safety. In the midst of their victory, both Izuku and Melissa were relieved to see that no one had gotten truly hurt. Even Mr. Aizawa's damages in this timeline wouldn't be so bad, as Izuku was able to act earlier and save him from much more harmful bruises. Of course, by the time Bruce as well as Carrie would have arrived, the day would have been saved. There was no need for the Sparrow to get involved, although she would change out of her hero costume as she went to go check on Aizawa to see if he were alright. In the meantime, Bruce would call over to Izuku, the two checking in with one another. Bruce was happy to see that no lives had been lost, and more so, he was proud of how Izuku had been able to hold his own, and that he couldn't have done a finer job. Izuku was thankful for Bruce's kind words, but at the same time, he knew he still had to get better. In the end of the day, there was still plenty more that he had to learn. If this fight had taught him anything, it was the fact that there were villains of all ranges and of all sizes. And if he were truly going to aim to be number one, then he would have to learn to overcome these foes. Before long, school would eventually continue. The students were given a few days off as there were still a lot of questions that had to be answered, and the police wanting to check in to learn just how on earth an attack like this could have happened. But once that was over and Class 1A had been joined together once more, everyone would be excited as an announcement would be made. The announcement of an upcoming school event, that being known as the UA Sports Festival, an opportunity to display one's skills to the world, and a chance for friendly competition between the upcoming and aspiring heroes. Izuku had his target set. If this was where he was going to make his announcement, then it was going to be by winning it all. Everyone had the same idea in their heads, and they all knew what they were aspiring to be. In the end, only one would be victorious. And Izuku had promised to himself that when it was all said and done, he would be the victor. Everyone gearing up as the UA Sports Festival was just on the horizon. This concludes What If Deku Was Batman? My Hero Academia, The Dark Knight Returns, Part 4. But as always, if you are a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue Neon Genesis Evangelion Redemption. What if Shinji went back in time? Book 1, Part 4. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.